Welcome to Jay Anything, the show about everything. I'm Jay, and if this is your first time on the channel, definitely remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Now, let's talk about some things. So, last Thursday, New Gods was unceremoniously canceled by Warner Brothers. And I can't say I'm terribly surprised. It's a space opera romance about cosmic demigods in a weird quasi-DC continuity. It kind of felt like a long shot when it was announced, and then there was no word for 18 months before it was just canceled out of nowhere. Now, to be fair, The Fourth World is a strange IP. The lore is vague, the concepts are difficult to understand, and the core dynamics of all of these characters are constantly shifting. Jack Kirby originally intended The Fourth World to be a separate continuity from the main DC. There were so many things about The Fourth World and the New Gods that just didn't work with what DC had established within their own shared superhero universe. But when's that ever stopped DC before? That said, there are a number of fantastic Fourth World series beyond Kirby's original. One of the most well-recognized ones is Tom King's Mr. Miracle that came out in 2018. It focused on Scott Free and Big Barda, two of the New Gods whose relationship and character histories are even more complicated than most of the other New Gods.
It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet with a lot of torture and fire pits.
And sure, I am disappointed that this big screen version from King and Ava DuVernay has been shelved for the time being, but it was probably the best move. Zack Snyder's Justice League that was recently released on HBO Max features Darkseid and his Forces of Apocalypse, basically half of the Fourth World equation right there. While we haven't seen the benevolent gods of New Genesis in live action yet, it does stand to reason that if this New Gods movie were to continue moving forward, King and DuVernay, when they were writing, would be at least somewhat beholden to Snyder's vision of Darkseid, Steppenwolf, Desaad, the Parademons, and they wouldn't really be able to bring their own novel or interesting perspective to the characters. Warner Brothers stated, when shelving the project, that it wasn't necessarily gone for good, that it could come back in the future.
Never say never, but don't hold your breath, kids.
Though, if that were to happen, it would likely look very different than King and DuVernay's treatment. But, since DC did leave the door open, consider Grant Morrison's Mr. Miracle. It was one of the 7 miniseries that comprised Seven Soldiers of Victory, a loosely connected mega arc that was itself a prelude to 2005's Infinite Crisis crossover event. In Morrison's series, the new Mr. Miracle, Shiloh Norman, is tasked with saving the New Gods of New Genesis, who have all lost their memories and been transformed into humans. This is of course due to Darkseid's manipulations. He is now Boss Darkseid and runs a club in New York. So it's a very different take on the New Gods than what we'd seen before. Now, I get it. The prospect of adapting one segment of a large crossover event that was a prelude to a bigger crossover event doesn't sound the most accessible.
Unless you're a glutton for Wikipedia deep dives, then go nuts!
But this juxtaposition between the cosmic surreality of the New Gods and Shiloh Norman's very human, relatable issues actually kind of makes perfect sense for a New Gods movie. Because of the nature of the New Gods, as we saw in Justice League and the uses of the Mother Boxes, Shiloh is kind of open to meet or interact with any character in the DC universe. The Fourth World transcends science and magic into an ethereal or extra-dimensional plane. So you could have Shiloh traveling through space, or on Earth teaming up with the Justice League, or going into different dimensions, finding alternate versions of himself. There's literally no limit to what you could do with a Fourth World story. That's why the Fourth World is so fun, but also why they're incredibly difficult to adapt.
Won't someone think of the CGI bills?
Setting the story on Earth with the New Gods as humans kind of anchors the story in a more human and relatable way. We still get the zaniness of the New Gods through Shiloh's exploits, but it is all centered and anchored around a human story. By setting the story on Earth, you get an interesting tale about a human helping demigods remember that they're demigods. Again, kind of complicated, but at the end of the day, also extremely fascinating. On top of all of this, Shiloh Norman is a character that has been established in the DC continuity since the mid-2000s, is a person of color, and hasn't really been used a lot since. He's kind of a perfect character to put into film because there's not a lot of backstory in the comics that needs to be used, and most comic fans themselves aren't super knowledgeable about Shiloh. Well, because he hasn't been in a lot of stuff. Of course, that's just one idea. I want to know what you think Warner Brothers and DC should do now that New Gods by Tom King and Ava DuVernay is effectively shelved. What would you like to see them do with the IP, and where would you like to see the Fourth World go in the future? Definitely let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.